What? There'll be horror, hosted by Henry Confidential and John Marr, with a special guest, Abel DeLu. This is the very first ever episode where we have a guest on because we decided, we're talking horror movies. Let's talk horror movies. So introduce Abel. Abel, on a scale
Bring
of
in a
1 to
creepy
10.
guy.
Yeah, not yet. You haven't been drinking that much. Don't show us that shot yet. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as a horror fan?
I love horror movies. Okay, I've always loved horror movies. I remember being about 9 years old and having The Ring come on TV, and it was just me upstairs. Yeah, my parents had gone to bed, and I just sat there watching that movie, and it was scary as shit. And I could not go to bed afterwards, so I spent the whole night sleeping on the couch upstairs.
Interesting side note. So, I've been married to my wife 19 years this year, so we've been together for 20 years. First date, The Ring.
So there you go. That's about how old John and I are.
Yeah. Let's bring the trifecta. The only movie that I can genuinely say scared me as a kid, The Ring. I'm not even joking.
There you go. Hey, look at us.
I stayed the night at a friend's house, and I watched it while in the basement, and I was scared shitless. It's one of those basements where you have the creepy light that's up top. You like if I was kidnapped, that was like, oh, that's my hope to get out. You know what I mean? Like, maybe if I had a black phone, I would tell me to go out there. But anyway, that's my way out. But it was like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. when the light's barely showing too. And you know how the Ring has that tint of like that blue white color. So it was like real creepy like conjunction there. So yes, that one always that fun fact. I watched it a couple months ago for the first time, probably in those almost 20 years. So wow. But so obviously with the new release of the aforementioned The Black Phone, we decided to make this a Scott Derrickson episode. Usually we like to do a mainstream, a niche, and a new release, and essentially all three of these are mainstream, but I feel like the Exorcism of Emily Rose of the mainstream is still pretty niche because people don't really discuss it or talk about it. Like on my Letterboxd, it doesn't have as many reviews as you would assume from a director of this magnitude. You know what I mean? Even if it's just for the fact of the director of Sinister or the guy who made Doctor Strange, you know what I mean? You would assume people would like after the fact, like, oh, I'll check out all of his stuff, but honestly, not as much. So, going into Scott Derrickson, John, what is your overall opinion of him just as a filmmaker as a whole?
I know you don't like when I say this, but like I feel like he's progressively gotten better, you know. Like, and honestly, like, you know, not I know Doctor Strange is in horror, but Doctor Strange definitely, like when you're watching the MCU in order, and like when you get to that Doctor Strange kind of universe, I credit Derrickson for the whole like all that Inception shit that happens in like the original Doctor Strange, like, and then they kind of they carried that forward. Raimi totally carried that forward. So Derrickson has a style, you know, and he brings that style along, and I think you see that in all these movies. Maybe not so much in Emily Rose, but as you go on, there's definitely like a tone to Scott Derrickson movies that I appreciate.
Yeah, and I guess the number one thing that I take from it, which is a personal favorite of mine, is the sound design and just the use of both score, but also just effects, you know what I mean? And like you kind of talked about the Sam Raimi thing where it's like they also kind of combine that with the use of like creaks and, you know, twitchy, you know, stuff and just the atmosphere. Abel,
Scott Derrickson was actually supposed to direct the newest Doctor Strange, which Marvel had announced was going to be the first MCU horror movie. So they were going to issue that as a horror movie on the basis that Scott Derrickson would be directing it.
Like, what did your guys? Have you guys both seen the second Doctor Strange?
Yeah. Yes.
What without getting into Doctor Strange, because it's not about that. What do you think? Because they said it was creative differences. What do you think is your guess of what those differences were, Abel? What if you had to take, you know, a guess? What do you think Derrickson's vision was?
I genuinely don't think it was about vision. I genuinely think they could just get Sam Raimi, and they were like, let's just get Sam Raimi. You know what I mean?
You think they just fucked Derrickson over for the bigger name?
I really do think so. I think Sam Raimi was available, and they were like, that's the guy that people want. They know at this point in their phase 4, they want their fans are like hardcore Marvel fans, right? So they know, especially after the newest Spider-Man, people want Sam Raimi. They knew who he is, and that was going to bring more people in. So I genuinely think that was just the main reason of bringing Sam Raimi in.
I think we could spoil Multiverse of Madness a little bit. I think the fact that they had the whole scene where Doctor Strange reanimates the dead Doctor Strange, and they do basically the movie turns into Army of Darkness for 25 minutes. I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense now, because like every stupid Sam Raimi gag happens in that 20-minute span. Like every single like camera shot, every like the ghosts flying around. I'm like, this is like Evil Dead all of a sudden here. It's Army of Darkness.
Yeah, do you guys like? I'll end it with this one more question. Do you guys think there would have been more quote unquote multiverse of madness technically if Scott Derrickson was in there with the creepiness that you could have used of the multiverse, or do you feel like that like Abel said, it was more of just the namesake, John?
I think if Derrickson directed Multiverse of Madness, you'd have had a lot of those like you see in the Black Phone, like where they kind of dissolve into like the past, and like into those like weird like double dissolves he does. You'd have a lot of that. You see that a lot in Sinister too, like where it's just like it like cuts between two different media. Like you'd have gotten a lot of that kind of like
honestly even in the Emily Rose with the use of the flashbacks. How does it cut back? Yeah, he does a really good job.
So I think maybe they missed out on a lot of really cool tricks they could have done.
We're going on a tangent now with Doctor Strange, but like, and I love Doctor Strange. Like it's a 5-star movie. I love it. But what I will say is they open the door of the dream state being the multiverse, and I feel like Scott Derrickson would have delved more into that because he clearly likes his dream sequences. So I do agree with that. So now that I've seen Scott Derrickson movies, even though I love the Sam Raimi Multiverse of Madness, now I'm curious of what we would have gotten with that. But
I want the Derrickson cut.
Derrickson got
Derrickson. But with that said, we are officially going to talk about Scott Derrickson now in his directorial debut of The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I'm gonna start with Abel as the guest. Did you watch it before this show, or did you prep for this? And generally speaking, what are your thoughts on this film?
Well, generally speaking, I don't like prepping for anything, but I had seen this movie. I've seen it twice actually, and see, the thing is, I was a big Dexter fan back in the day, right? And I always thought Jennifer Carpenter was the outstanding performer in that show.
Yeah.
So I went and watched this movie, which I thought it would be just another exorcism movie, right? Because they were a dime a dozen at that point, in my opinion. Like, it could have just been like somebody, some girl going all creepy and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was a procedural drama.
Yes.
It had so much more to it. So it is both a great horror movie and both a great court drama in one movie. And that's what I really appreciate about this film right here is it takes you on a ride and then it takes you on a completely different spin halfway through the movie, or like at the third point through it throughout it.
I feel like that when you start watching this movie, you don't even realize it's a horror movie. Like if you didn't know the title going in, you wouldn't even think that this was a horror movie until you get that really first, I guess the first couple flashbacks. I think when she's in college, I think is the first time she had an epileptic like moment, and that's when you start getting the creepiness. And how I perceive this film is I kind of feel like it's a lot of hearsay, so they use that to their advantage with the horror, because the horror, I feel like it's fantasy in terms of like you don't know what really happened because you weren't there, because all this is told in flashbacks, which is stories because of the the stories in the courtroom. So I feel like Derrickson did a good job of like using that to his advantage and making a horror movie through a court drama, like you said, and it doesn't feel out of place or cheesy or weird because like it's a story, it's a fairy tale, it's a ghost story, you know what I mean? So I really worked for me.
The thing about the horror in this movie is I feel like through the court drama, the horror kind of sticks with you, if you know what I mean. Because the court drama aspect really makes you think about the horror that the characters went through, and that means it really sticks with you. Whereas like cheap gimmicks like jump scares, which I'm not a big fan of, which we might get to later in this episode, they don't really stick with me. So that just rings very hollow with me. But the whole aspect of the court drama makes you actually think about the trauma that the characters in this movie went through, and that just made it really, have a lasting effect.
I like that. John, what are your thoughts on Exorcism of Emily Rose?
Yeah, like two points of order off the top. One, not Derrickson's directorial debut. He directed Hellraiser Inferno, which went direct to video before Emily Rose. Just so everybody knows. Just so everybody knows, just putting it out there. I don't want any people coming at me in the comments. Hellraiser Inferno was his first movie. And secondly, I don't like Jennifer Carpenter, like really at all. But I feel that the things I don't like about her actually play into this role because I think she kind of she makes goofy faces when she acts, which is perfect for this movie because all the character does is make goofy faces. So it actually, I feel like her weaknesses played into this movie. But I do agree with everything Abel said. It's not so much like the courtroom drama. It's the fact that the prosecutor is a religious guy going after a priest. The defense person is like an agnostic defending the priest. There's a lot of different layers to what's going on in the court.
I think it does a good job of not really picking one side or the other. It kind of comes at the story neutral. So as an audience member, you feel like you're a juror. I mean, honestly, spoilers for the end of the movie. They charge him guilty for criminal negligence, but then they obviously gave him the time served sentence because they're like, all right, technically you fucked up because we can't prove any of this, but we kind of believe you. You know what I mean? So it's one of those where it kind of doubled up there. So it did a good job of having its cake and eat at the same time of not really being biased, but also showing all sides of the coin. And, like I said, all the horror is because it's all hearsay. You don't really know truly, are they seeing things? I love when she's having these, tweaking moments of seeing the creepiness. Is that her psychosis? Is that the drugs? Is that her sickness? Or is that just word of mouth that they're just, exaggerating the story? And I think he did a really good job of that. And I actually give him a lot of credit. I think he had a lot of style to this because of the way it was able to flow with the horror and the drama and not feel boring. I think this was really well paced and really enjoyable.
I think you also have that gut punch moment when the psychiatrist friend who thinks to be their star witness just gets killed. Up out of the oh shit, because the whole movie there isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of gnarly killing or gross body horror. There's no real death and destruction in this movie, but that really comes out of nowhere, and it's a real tonal shift that guy just gets killed.
I actually had a feeling that he was doing it, that he did it on purpose. So I don't know if it ended up being an accident or if he did it on purpose, but because he backed out, he's like, I'm not going to do it. But he was clearly backing away, and I couldn't tell if he was purposely knowing a car was going there or whatever. But it's one of those. It reminded me. You don't know. It reminds me of As Good as It Gets. I mean, no, not As Good as It Gets. A Few Good Men. I just got As Good as It Gets in my mind. A Few Good Men of the one guy who's gonna go in there and he's gonna tell, and then he ends up just backing off and he kills himself. You know what I mean? So it's one of it gave me those vibes, and it's I don't know if that was a coincidence, an accident, or if that was on purpose, but it just reminded me of that. So let's go around the table. Abel, what is your overall rating of The Exorcism of Emily Rose?
In terms of these three movies,
generally speaking, we'll rank the three after the fact, but just what is your rating of this one?
Out of how much?
You can do a 5, 100%, however you want to go. We letterbox it up here, so we go out of 5, but however.
So I'm more of a European guy, so I would go out of 10. So I would rate this about a 7.9, I think.
Okay, I like that. So I'd say that's probably we'll bump that up to a 4 stars. John, where are you at with this?
I'm at a solid. It's a 3, and I also don't like it. So it's a 3 stars, and I don't hit the heart. It's a fine movie. I have no real flaws. There's nothing structurally wrong with this movie. There's nothing directorially wrong with this movie. I just don't. It's not something that I would come back and rewatch a bunch of times. It's just how I feel about it. I also am just me. Religious horror is not my bag at all. I'm not into it.
That's fair. Yeah. So this one for me, I really like the courtroom dramas. I don't really like, procedurals where it's which I say it's all the time. I don't like All the President's Men, but I love Spotlight. Sometimes when it works, but most of them don't work. But this one, it's a nice courtroom drama, but it does a good job with the horror. And we'll talk about later of just the idea of the fantastical horror works for me because I'm invested in what they're selling, and it did a good job. So it's a solid 4-star for me. And I was pleasantly surprised, and I honestly, first time I see it on sale, I'm buying it. I'm going to probably throw it in rotation and, watch it, just for the procedures and the horror and all that stuff. I will say the one thing that not bummed me out, but upset me is my sound bar. Whenever I'm watching the courtroom stuff, I got to bump it up to 60. And then whenever the horror stuff happens, all the flashes, I got to go all the way down to 35. It was just,
it's like you're watching a Christopher Nolan movie.
Well, I didn't say all that. Relax. Now we're going to jump over to Scott Derrickson's second film on today's dockets, and that is Sinister. I will let John start off.
Sinister, I'm a huge fan of Sinister. And honestly, again, I'll say again, like usually supernatural horror, I'm not a huge fan of supernatural horror, but Sinister, I think hits it. Sinister is probably like the blueprint for like what you want to do in a supernatural horror movie. I think there's a lot of great character work in Sinister. My one drawback, and I think Abel's going to say it if I don't say it, is there's a lot of unnecessary jump scares in Sinister. I think if they peeled away almost all of the jump scares and just let this movie stand on its own and just let the character, like the Boogle character, stand at the horror as itself. Because all the slow burn revelation of Ethan Hawke's character, like unraveling the mystery, is the horror. You don't need like, you don't need that guy like popping on the screen every 5 minutes. So that's why it's not like 100% for me. So I give it that criticism, but I think aside from that, it is perfect. It's like a perfect mystery paranormal horror movie.
Yeah. So for me, this one. So fun fact, I guess I saw this one in theaters in college, and I remember being scared shitless. But now I'm thinking either I was not paying attention, I only got the jump scares because I was on a date, so like that's the only thing that got me, or I saw a different movie and I just haven't mixed. I'm honestly not sure because on this rewatch, like I was invested in the concept. Like I really loved the family dynamic. I loved Ethan Hawke's character. I liked the concept of the true crime and him being true to his work. And he's like, hey, this could be it. And once I hit this, we're set for life. And I loved like, his craft, and I loved the town being against him because it's like, yo, you're going to make us look bad. And it's all for the publicity. Like we don't dig that. And then every time that he's out working, when he's writing and stuff, and he's doing his research, like there's creepy elements, but like, I felt like the payoff just, I don't know. There's something about by the end. I don't know if I was checked out or what really happened. Cause I feel like what I was leading up to, I was expecting to like be all in. And by the end I was like, yeah, I didn't get it. I didn't really feel anything after that. And it's just a bummer because, spoilers for the Black Phone. Like I really like that movie. So I watched this one after. So when I went in, I kind of went with high expectations. I try not to do that, but like, I felt like everything I've heard vibe wise of how they kind of, are similar vibe wise. I was, going in with that. And then the payoff of Black Phone for me personally was great. So I was expecting the payoff here to be like top notch, and it just wasn't. And it could be another one where on another watch later down the road, I'm like, all right, now I understand like the story and all that stuff, but like it just didn't hit for me, and it really bummed me out. It's still a good movie in terms of on a technical level. Like I love the sound design, I love the creepiness of it, I love Ethan Hawke's performance, I love the family dynamic and all the stuff, like everything that was going on with the son and how he started to like, I don't want to say possessed, but like he was starting to go through his stuff, like sleeping in the box and going outside and sleepwalking, whatever he's going. Like I really was invested in all that story, but like by the end, I was like, like I don't know, it just didn't click at the very end. So Abel, what are your thoughts on Sinister?
This came out around the same time as The Conjuring, right?
Maybe right before, I think, but yeah,
maybe a little bit before.
Yeah,
I think a year before.
Yeah. Okay, but not too long before.
Yeah.
And I remember this trailer. I think the trailer for this and the trailer for The Conjuring sort of, at least where I'm from, they sort of came out around the same time. If you know,
maybe.
Yeah.
And I remember the trailer for this movie just spoiling the shit out of it. Right? So I watched the trailer, and it just had every single jump scare that the movie had.
Jump scare.
So the first time I watched the movie, I was ready for every jump scare, and that's the only thing you're focused on. So the first time I watched this movie, I absolutely hated it. I thought it was trash. Then I watched it way later, right? Like 2 years ago. No, yeah, 2-3 years ago. And I think this is an exceptional horror movie.
Complete 180. I like it.
If you take away the little bit of gratuitous jump scares that are kind of unnecessary, the whole idea of the videotapes that he watches and the town not wanting him to upset it's just great tension all throughout, even though it's a very played out premise, right? A guy goes into a house where there's been a murder and like that. We've seen that 100 times, right? And I always thought I liked The Conjuring more than I liked this one. I don't want to keep bringing it back to The Conjuring, but it's a family moving into a house where some creepy shit happened, but I enjoy this one better. I enjoy this one more. I think this one has a lot more meat to it. It's a lot more of a character study, and it has. Unfortunately, it's not been realized into an actual franchise, but I thought this would be a great way for a new horror icon to be materialized, as in Bagul, right?
There is a sequel, but I haven't seen it. I know that.
The sequel is dog shit, but that doesn't take away from this movie. I think this movie creates a certifiably creepy new sort of aura and a new sort of way to have your horror presented, which is in the way that he watches these clips. It may be around the same time that VHS did it as well, but I just think this movie did it the best. And I think this is an actual really good horror movie.
This movie, like during what you're saying with the clips and going through the back, it reminded me of It Chapter 1 when they're going through that kind of that, I don't remember what, like the cassette thing or like that thing when they're going through, and then Pennywise just low key just starts to like creep in and all that stuff, and it gave me those vibes, and I feel like that was inspired by like stuff that we got here, because it really like took its time and like crept in with it, and like in this one, like obviously through various scenes, and Ethan Hawke, I don't want to say he's possessed, but he started to like get paranoid, and like everything that's really starting to like take over his mind and his just his overall feel, and it started to like really affect his relationship.
I do think I would have loved to see this as like a Haunting of Hill House sort of
like a miniseries.
Yeah, I think that would have been an ultimate sort of.
Honestly, just that character of all of his true crime stuff, I feel like that could be a series where a mini series of like 6 to 8 episodes where just him covering a bunch of different quote unquote true crimes, and you could really probably do two per episode. I mean, every 2 episodes cover one, so it like spreads out, so it's not rushed, and I feel like that would be a lot of fun. So yeah, I would definitely.
You get the whole backstory of like his big success, and then like he screws up a bunch of times, and I think the big thing about him,
like Haunting of Hill House, but it as we have it now, I think this is a great horror movie.
He's like a tragic hero. Like everything, like basically, you have everything is like
a martyr.
The thing is, like he gets so wrapped up in his work, like he puts blinders on, like he's not sleeping. He's like, and the wife is like the one that constantly keeps like telling the audience like what's really happening. It's like he lies to his family. He moves him into the house. He lies about like where the crimes happened.
In the house.
In
the street.
Not in the house. It happened in the backyard. What the fuck? That's no different if it happened in the backyard.
Yeah, like, when the little girl drew that picture, I was like,
yeah, like everything. The whole scene, like when he finally's had enough and they're just fleeing town. Like that's such a good scene too.
It's like, that's one thing I'll say. Like they didn't need all the creepy ghost kids.
Okay, yeah, that's fair too.
They could have just used the family as one unit, because they're being corrupted. That's easy enough for us to see, if you know what I mean. It just doesn't need to be that on the nose.
Like I said, they could peel away. They could peel away like one. If they peeled away just one layer of nonsense from this movie, it's perfect.
Yeah,
just like I said, everything that you guys are saying, I agree with. There's something just about the ending where it just didn't pay off. So I was left like, oh, I don't know. I was just maybe at that point I was kind of checked out. Maybe I was tired.
Fair.
I don't know.
It took a rewatch for me.
Yeah, I'm willing to agree with that, because, like I said, on a technical level and a performance wise, I like loved it. Borderline. It's just the story by the end, the payoff. Because I actually like the build. Like I'm really conflicted on how I feel about this. I don't know why.
This is also one of those movies that it's a theater movie. Like I feel this if you watch this in a crowded theater, like you're gonna get a lot more out of it than just watching.
Yeah, I'll probably have to rewatch it with my roommate so I can at least get that because I I had that I think it was last year when I rewatched Halloween with my roommate, and I was like, all right, I know I really like this movie, but after watching it with my roommate, I love this movie because just the vibe that it was able to like get. Because when you're watching by yourself, you're like, oh, this is kind of a slow horror movie, but when you're watching with other people, you're like, ha, sucker, you don't know what's going on. But yeah, so Abel, on your scale of 10, what do you give Sinister?
It's a tough one because I don't think it's that much higher than the Exorcism of Emily Rose, but I'm just gonna give it an 8.2.
Okay, and then I'll go next because I'm lower. As of right now on my viewing, I'm at a 3 out of 5 because I don't do half stars, so I feel like I probably would go 3.5 if I did half stars. I always like to say that just because when I'm trying to gauge how I feel about it, but like. I don't want to go on a tangent talking about Conjuring like what you did, but when I watched Conjuring 2, I had to go down to 2 stars because the payoff and everything I didn't care about, and it was just too long. This one's not too long at least, and I actually enjoyed it on a technical level. So this one I'm at 3 stars, but like if I did half, it would probably be 3.5. John?
Yeah, I'm at like 4.5, so I always round up to 4.5. I think, like I said, if they just didn't rely on the cheesy jump scares, which I got to imagine is like some post-production shit, where the producer, or like Blumhouse or whatever,
not a Scott Derrickson thing. So I'm willing to give Scott Derrickson the break.
Yeah, it's a Blumhouse movie, right? Pretty sure. Yeah, that's freaking David Bloom. Like, can we have the dude like jump in like bah! On screen? Can we do that? I totally see that happening. I guarantee like at least that final scene was definitely not in the movie. And like every single the scene when he sticks his head up in the attic and the guy comes like this way, those were not in the original cut. I'm gonna guarantee that. Yeah,
it did get me. I will.
Yeah, of course it's gonna get you. It's cheesy as shit. So that's why it's not a 5-star movie. Like it's actually almost a 4-star movie, but I'll give it a 4.5 just because like the character work is pretty phenomenal.
I agree with you, John.
Yeah.
All right. So now we are going to the guest of honor, the new release, the Black Phone. So
the black shirt.
The Black Phone. I'll start.
The Black Sheep is what it says right here.
There you go. I like that. So I'll start. I really like this movie. This felt. I mean, obviously it's based on the novel of Stephen King's son, so it obviously has a lot of those.
Is it really? Because I was thinking the entire time, like, yo, it's got to be a Stephen King story.
Yeah. It was based. What's this kid's name? Joe Hill or what?
Joe Hill's his pen name. Yeah.
So it's one of those where it's like the inspirations was there of like the bullying and just the small town, everyone knows each other. The classic vibe, the 70s, and all that worked for me because it felt natural within the story of what they're trying to tell. How I always say what works for me is if you're going to tell a story in a time frame, don't use the time frame as a crutch. Use it as an atmosphere, and then just tell a story within that atmosphere. I think it did a good job of that. Like it's not throwing it in your face. Like you'll have like the Thing poster, or no, was that a different movie I watched? That's a different movie I watched, but it did a similar thing where it's like just
talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's you know what I mean. Where it's just part of it just adds to the characters. Where it's like it actually built a relationship with I've only seen it the one time and I don't have my phone in front of me. But like the one kid where it's like he got in that fight. And honestly, the negatives that I hear about this is the first act is slow and it's just aggressive like violence. But I feel like when you're trying to tell a story of like within this atmosphere, like that's just what this community is. Like this community is kind of like violent. It's on its toes. I mean, you got someone grabbing kids. I think it was like 5 or 6, whatever, like at that time. So like people are on edge. You have people with their histories. Like you got the backstory of the dad and why he's on edge and why he is the way he is. So like it could come off as just an evil dad, which Stephen King probably would have done, where he's just, all adults are bad, but his son did a good job of like, yo, he's bad, but like he has a reason. You're not trying to justify it, but at least you understand why he's that. He's not just pure evil. And then with all the bullies and stuff, that's just kids are gonna fight and be pieces of garbage. And like they at least do a good job of like stand up for yourself. You have the sister stand up for her brother. You have the one kid who's a badass, but he gets picked on for being a minority, but he's actually a badass. And then you have him befriending the quote unquote nerd, who's really not a nerd. He's an athlete. You know what I mean? It does a good job of like covering all the stereotypes and twisting them to fit this narrative. so that's why the first half hour really worked for me, because it took a while to lead up to the kidnapping of our initial character, and that's fine with me because it built this vibe and this tone. So that's the main complaint I see from people in this, and that worked for me. And then you go up to everything, the story, like I liked all the flashbacks. I actually personally I love that no questions are answered. Like I really like that, because if you're starting to answer those questions now, if you don't like the answer now, it just ruins. You know what I mean? Like in the original Silence of the Lambs, you know, everyone's like, "What, Hannibal? Why do you eat them?" You know, just because I do. You know what I mean? It's just who, you know what I mean? It's like that's what makes it terrifying. And I feel like it did a good job. Like you have the grabber with his games that he plays, you know, upstairs, and it's like, why does he do that? He just does it, and it's creepy sitting there with a shirt. Yeah, actually, now I'll unbutton your shirt. Let's get a little grabber action there going. But yeah. So the ending was so emotional for me because of what built up to the beginning, and that's why I felt like the payoff, it came full circle, and it didn't feel too long for me. Sure, could there have been more? Yeah, but that's a lot of movies. Let's be honest. So I don't ever judge it on that. I just judge on surface level what we got, and if I was satisfied by the end, I was happy. So Black Phone is positive for me, and I'll move over to Abel. What's your thoughts on the Black Phone? You saw it today, right? To be clear, you're the freshest on it.
Yes, sir. What's this movie called? The Black Shot.
The Black Shot, the white quesadilla.
Ah, that's delicious.
I don't believe
I'm very conflicted about this movie.
Okay.
Because I think what it does well does really well. Right? It builds suspense really well. I think the main antagonist, the main threat of the movie is very real, and it's very well realized and materialized. Like, he is creepy, and he also doesn't seem like he seems beatable, but it's also near impossible, if you know what I mean, which is a great tension to build. But what I would have loved is some more atmosphere within the town. Like, okay, so he's on the phone with the kids, right? And I get that you can't build up all of these kids, but at times I just didn't know which kid he was talking to, right? Yeah. Like, for me, it was clear. Okay, he has. Sorry, John. You go ahead.
No, you always got to consider we're live. Keep going.
Yeah. For me, at the time, like, okay, you have the baseball kid. That was very clear. After that, like, there were like
the paper boy.
Yeah, a couple kids where I was like, it was pretty, like, you know, touch and go. Like, I didn't know who we were talking about. And I hadn't started drinking then. Okay, I was sober at this point. Sure. No, but that was just, I would have loved to have more of a feel for the actual dread within the town, because I felt the dread from his sister, sure, right? But not so much within the town itself. And this is where I think I always love horror movies to be concise and short, and to have like a short run. I don't want horror movies to be 2.5 hours long, but this one, I think it could have cut some things and added some things. I didn't really feel like it used its runtime to the full extent of its merits, if you know what I mean.
That's fair. All right, John, what? How do you feel? So me and Abel are so far two ends of the coins. Where are you at?
Everything Abel said is like pretty much my criticism. I'm just going to say it a little differently. Like, the stakes of the movie are wrong. The stakes are wrong. Like, if you're in, and first of all, it's not a small town community. They're in Denver, Colorado. Like, it's Denver, Colorado. It's the late 70s. It's not the.
And it just gave off the small town vibes where everyone knows.
Yeah. They're in the suburbs of Denver. They're in northern Denver. So it's a big city with big city cops technically, but it's a suburb, right? So, and it's the 70s. This isn't like the turn of the century. And kids are getting abducted really close together. Like, if you think, like, they're getting abducted really close together, and not just close together like geographically, close together in time. Like, basically, it's the same school year, and like 3 kids in the same class get abducted. Like, that town should be like pitchforks, torches, vigilante justice,
evil guys tonight.
Yeah, you don't see any of that. Like literally, like a kid gets abducted, and then the next day, kids are just walking by themselves down the street. No goddamn way. Yeah, no way. Like I grew up. I'm a little bit older.
Curfew.
Than the kids in this movie. But if that would happen in my hometown, I grew up in a suburb of New York City. If that was happening in my town, my mother would be like, I'd be wearing my mother as a fucking backpack, like walking back and forth to school. There's no way. That's the only everything else about the movie is great. But the stakes are absolutely wrong. And one thing I do want to mention, I think Jeremy Davies knocks it out of the park as the alcoholic father. The scene with the daughter, like with the abuse, not that I meant the beating up little girls, but that scene is like so great. Like I would have taken a whole movie of that tension and that family dynamic. That was a fantastic scene.
You want to learn how to beat your daughter? There you go.
Yeah, if you want to learn in a few years, you could see it here. But if you want to learn how to beat your daughter, like you watch The Black Phone.
Everyone here, pray for John Marr's kids. Also, I want to. I agree with that. I also just want to say, like, I'm sorry to have to be the voice of negativity here, but the character of Max,
little brother, yeah.
No, Max, James Ransone.
Yeah, it just didn't.
He's the brother, right?
Yeah, the brother. Yeah, I think I meant the brother. Yeah. I actually like that.
I like him a lot. It worked for me.
Wacky late '70s coke addict. That's pretty accurate. Like he was on type.
I'll put up a spoiler thing real quick. Hold on, because I do want to talk about this real quick. So this worked for me because I loved the fact that he was like onto it, and he was like, he knew he was right technically, but he's on drugs, so it's taking him a while to come full circle, and then you realize like, oh shit, my brother. So then when he like finds out, he's like, oh, I'm gonna help and then be the good guy, and then boom, he's out.
No, the funny thing is like he could have just saved him, but he's like, let me tell you how I figured it out. I was like, you fucking idiot.
But it built up with the character because of what he was like before. Like that was that's his over the top personality, and I understand, because he was like he was cocky. He's like, my brother's at work, I got time, let's talk. You know what I mean? So it's like it makes sense for the character.
It's just one more thing in this movie that should have been given more time to breathe.
I'll give you that.
Because for me, that came out of fucking nowhere. Not him getting killed, him being introduced in the movie, and him being out of the movie for a long time, and all of a sudden being back in the movie. Like
they kind of give you that red herring vibe, like where you don't think it's him, but you think he's somehow in the house. Like, is he in the same house? Like like the whole time, but he's not. Keep that spoiler up.
Now, speaking of the ending and the spoilers, since might as well. Now it's up. If it's up, we're gonna talk about them. But I love the Silence of the Lambs ending, essentially, where it's like they're like in the wrong house. They're in the right house technically, in terms of like what they find, but like they're in the wrong house, so like the tension's like still there. And I really love just how
he just walks in. He just walks out the front door, and it takes him like, well, the sister sees him right away, but it takes the cops like a whole minute to realize they should just turn around.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. What are the odds? It's just across the street. Like you really think about it, like, oh, I just found all these bodies. Oh, the house is probably 10 miles away, because no way it's this close. I'm cool with that. But I loved it. I almost got a tear at that scene. It really worked for me. I'm like, fuck, man, they did a good job. So
that, and like all the red herrings of how you think he's going to escape. It's like, okay, do this. If you dig here, you'll get out. And then he digs his way into the locker, and it's locked from the outside. He's like, God damn it.
Exactly. And I loved all that stuff, because it's exploiting your expectations of like, the cliches and whatever you're going to get from horror. And it's like, because it did a good job of setting up these the kids, like the spirits, of essentially saving him, but also not.
Like they had their own plans that were like the master plans, and none of their master plans worked. And the only master plan that works, like, we're gonna have to fight your way out.
And that's why they built up the whole bullying stuff, and that's that works for me, because everything came full circle, and that's why I felt like a payoff. And that's why I said by the end of this movie, I'm borderline loving it, because if it's similar to X for me, where it's like everything that I got from that movie, I love. Now, in terms of, is it going to hold this test of time, and has it become a staple in my heart? Well, we'll see. Like this is one of those ones where it's like, when I first saw the Batman in No Way Home, I'm like, yep, personal favorites, no hesitation, throw them in there. These movies, I'm like, all right, these need to have time because of just what they are, and they need to, like, let time, have its course. So like, I really enjoy this movie. I feel like I could watch this if I'm in the mood for a horror movie, if I'm in the mood for a criminal drama, if I'm in the mood for a family drama. Like, it's got different elements to it that it can, like, cater to how I'm feeling that day. So I am at a 4-star. Well, like I said, I don't do half stars, but like this would easily be a 4.5, borderline like 4.75, close to 5, just like X, depending on how time's gonna tell. But it's a solid 4 for now. And on rewatch, if I'm like, if I get a tier, if I get that single tier one more time on rewatch, I might have to just go 5 stars just on principle. But we will see. But Abel, as the negative, technically, I don't know if your score's gonna be negative, but as the lesser emotionally, what's your score on this movie?
I just want to one more thing. I don't know if you guys ever watched The Walking Dead, but did this movie remind you guys of that one episode where Rick gets calls in the prison from
his wife,
dead people?
Yeah.
I think I remember that. Was that like season 3?
That was the only thing I could think of throughout the entire movie. I was like, yo, this is Rick Grimes being called up by dead people. This movie, it was good. I thought it reminded me a lot of a Stephen King movie, but it just didn't hit me in the way that I wish it would have. So I think this movie for me gets a 7.3.
That's really positive for me. I like it. Let's go. John, where are you at? And we didn't talk about this yet. Going in, you were thinking that the trailer might have spoiled some. Now that you've seen it, do you think the trailer spoiled too much, or do you think it did a good job of giving you the premise, but also not too much?
I think it basically hits all the major notes without spoiling the ending at all, really. Because like you have no idea. It looks bleak for the freaking kid in the trailer, definitely.
Great performance, by the way. I want to give him credit. Great performance. I can't wait to see more from him.
Yeah, this is a solid 4, and like really, it's really just because like Alba and I both talked about like. In my head, if I could just think of like a simple solution to avoid this whole thing from happening, like the main scene that took me out of the entire movie and like robbed it of being a 5-star movie is the scene when James Ransone is looking at the map and you see how close the pins are together. And I'm like, well, couldn't you just put a fucking cop car right freaking there? And like that would solve the whole problem because you'd be able to see all the whole area. Because it's not like it's a mountainous area. It's all freaking flat with a couple of trees. One cop car could have solved this whole problem. Not that I'm like pro cop, anti-cop, but they made the cops in this movie look really goddamn stupid. So it's a 4.
And I'll defend that a little bit. Whereas like they said it right away. They're like, oh yeah, thanks, buddy. All right, if you don't have anything else, because it's like and also they mentioned like, hey, clean up. You know what I mean? They saw the coke, so they were like, it's one of the great MacGuffins because like he's technically right, but his character is so untrustworthy and so not worthy of like being right that you understand why they would brush him off. So,
but they kind of foreshadow the cops being dipshits in the scene when they bring the Gwen into the office and she's like cursing him out because they basically like accused her, like, you must know more about this crime. You must know more about this crime. And she's like, all right, you fuck sticks. Like, which is a great, that was like the highlight of the movie. I was like, oh, this girl's awesome. And really they could have just like, I mean, I know they could have just like they could have just treated her like a human being and then maybe wrapped the whole thing up an hour sooner, I
don't know. I mean, you were alive, but the 70s
barely
women, you know what I mean? It's just not, it wasn't a great time. Like they weren't there yet. So like, but yeah. So with that said, that's that. So Abel, how do you rank these three?
Are we ranking them or no?
Yeah. Well, you gave the ratings, but yes, yours is easier to kind of, decide your ranking. But yes, what is your ranking, Abel?
It's easy for me. It's Sinister on top. Really close to that is Exorcism of Emily Rose. And then I think pretty significantly below that is The Black Phone.
I don't know if you know math, but I wouldn't say significantly. 7.3 is not that far from 7.9. Like it's not
I think that's pretty significant in terms of how I rate movies. That's
interesting. John, what's your ranking?
0.5 is a lot for me.
Sinister up top, Black Phone, and then Emily Rose. It's a half step down is Black Phone, and then a full step down is Emily Rose.
And then for me, Sinister at the top. I would say full step down Emily Rose, even though they're the same rating, but the odds of Black Phone being a 5 is higher than them being.
You said 4. Sinister, you meant Black Phone at the top, I think.
Yeah, Black Phone at the top. Full step down Emily Rose, and then a step and a half down at Sinister. Like it's pretty, like they're spread out. Like the odds of Black Phone becoming a favorite is high. Emily Rose, I don't think it would ever become a favorite, but I'm always going to be positive on it. I know that, and I feel like I'll watch it multiple times. So yeah, with that said,
bias. I'm not. Who said that? I didn't say that.
See, hold on. You're lucky I don't have any clips on this banner here. But yeah, with that said, this is There Will Be Horror. That we took a little hiatus because we were doing some trivia and all that stuff, but we're back. We don't have anything set in stone for next week, but we'll figure that out and we'll have some fun. But Abel, what do you think? What'd you think of guesting on this? Do you think this show is guest worthy, or do you think it's better just me and John sticking together?
I think you guys have a good rapport. And I think you guys could use a handsome motherfucker like me.
Hey, well, you heard it from the man, the myth, the legend himself. Abel, make sure you guys check out.
Imitated, never duplicated.
Make sure you check out everything he's doing over at TMG Geek. I think it's TMG Trivia, the channel that the geek matches are on. He's a co-host / runner over there. So make sure you check out that stuff. And also he'll be on this channel, doing the fuck arounds as well as singles and teams. And then obviously check out John. Let's take our faces down. It's at the bottom. It doesn't matter. There. Oh, no, you can't see it. But yeah, follow him on Letterboxd. Follow me on Letterboxd. Abel doesn't Letterboxd as good, but you can follow him anyway. And then yeah. So with that said, my name's Henry Confidential. That is John Marr. Don't call him the mayor because he will kill you.
I'm coming for you, Nick Harley.
And make sure you see Abel in America. Bye, guys.